No. Green laser pointers are banned in Canada. Have you seen this? So the denomination of Canadian bills. Yeah, I saw the red one. Isn't that cool? Yeah. No, it's not allowed because almost so the way that they get a green laser is they take an infrared laser and frequency up it. And most of these leak a huge amount of IR around them. And so like everyone looks at the thing and they're getting a bunch of IR reflections.
Gentlemen, I found you a minute taker, not pure almonds, but not a jabber scribe. Melchior Almonds, friend of ours, first time IETF. Thought it would be good if he immediately becomes part of the machine. I got half of your cooking.
Yeah, go for it.
Give me some of your money.
What are you spending?
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Sidrops meeting at IETF 105. We're in Montreal. It's not even cold. Okay. Is it? Okay. Well, that's true. It's cold inside, not outside. Okay. I'm Chris. That's Kayer. That's Job over there helping out. Yeoman's work. We have a note taker. We also have the whatchamacallit, note well. Note taker. I think we need a jabber scribe still. Does somebody want to jabber? And I don't mean at the mic. Terry? Oh, I thought you nodded. No.
I can jabber.
Aha. Okay, Warren will jabber. All right. So before we go through the AOB, and I know somebody's going to stand up and get off my business, for those people that speak at the mic, please keep the mic in front of you or we can't hear what you're saying. Thank you very much. Good example. The thingy has a pointy on it. You can point like this. There's a thing in front of you, so you don't have to do this. Because also this is rude. All right. Is there any other business that you would like to discuss that we can add to the agenda? Yeah, go.
May I add one item?
Certainly, depending on the item.
The item is about diversity.
Diversity?
Diversity.
Oh, diversity.
I'm sorry about my my accent.
Yeah. No, I thought you were making a DNS joke.
Boom tish.
It's the only other half of the internet we care about. Yes, why don't we do that as soon as Mr. Bush is done with his time?
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have these four other presenters and Mr. Manderson. We'll be a little squeezed on time, I think, so everybody should keep it short. Draft status, as it says, the documentation. All these slides, by the way, are in the meeting material, so you can go down to that and go to town. A couple of things were moved from the ISG processing to editor's queue. That's the TAL and the router keying draft. And we added some ASPA stuff and the validating BGP speaker that we're still working on. All right. Yeah, slides. Awesome. Okay. So, go back. Alexander. Oh, you should also feel free to either hold the mic or use the little thingy stand.
Not my slides. Oh, this is my slides. Okay, my name is Alexander Azimov. I work for Yandex, and today I'm going to provide you a very short update on ASPA drafts. So, just to quickly remind you what are ASPA. So, ASPA is Autonomous System Provider Authorization. So, but ASPA is much shorter. So, it's a new API object that can be used to detect leaks and hijacks, malicious and mistakes. It works outside of BGP itself, so it doesn't change the protocol. And of course, it can be automized with BGP roles, but it is out of scope. So, wait. Good. Here is the changelog. First of all, good news, the drafts were adopted by this working group. And I hope that it will boost the process of working on this document. And it seems that I was right, since recent discussion in the mainnet list was quite fruitful. And previously we were stated that ASPA can be used to verify ICE paths that are received from customers and peers. So now we have extended the way ASPA can be used, and so you can now also verify paths that are received from customers. We are not speaking here about forged ICE path, but we are speaking about mistake root leaks, and it is quite useful feature since all other drafts that are targeting route leak detection are not capable to detect leaks on customer side. We've also made a universe rule for what we should do with anomalies. So it must be all anomalies, hijacks, root leaks must be rejected. I will go into details further later. Sorry. And so let's get some details. Good. So there is some text there, but I will go over with you, and so it will not look such complicated. So if we're speaking about the prefixes that are received from customer or by customer, from provider, or for example from IX, it may have two subpaths: the upstream path, when prefix is traveling from customer to provider, and so on, and downstream path, when prefix is traveling down from provider to customer, and so on. The connection can be a single autonomous system number, it can be a peering link, it can be a transparent IX. But anyway, the first downstream link will have invalid outcome according to ASPA a verification procedure. So in this exact example, IS3 is leaking, IS1 is taking transit from IS2, IS3 taking transit from both IS2 and IS4, IS5 is taking transit from IS4. So I hope it will be clear. So according to ASPA verification procedure, the outcome from pair verification of IS2 and IS3 is invalid. As soon as we are going through first downstream link, all downstream links that are we can find after that in the path must be also provided to customers. Otherwise, it's a leak. So to verify this path, we found that IS2 and IS3 is invalid. And after that, we check IS4 and IS3. It's very important to check IS4 and IS3 instead of IS3 and IS4, because otherwise we are getting in problems with siblings. And so if we have these two invalid, the result is that in the downstream subpath there is there is a sequence which goes up. So it's a round trip. So I understand it may sound a bit difficult, but in reality it's very easy to code, and I have already dropped a piece of code in the mailing list. You can take a look at it. So maybe in words it's harder to understand than in the piece of code. So the second thing is universe policy for anomalies. Previously, we tried to treat differently hijacks and root leaks. We had good intent. We believed that in some cases root leaks may pass by because maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's the only path to the originator. But since we're talking not only about mistakes, we're also talking about forged activity, or the malicious activity. The receiver cannot distinguish if it is receiving a prefix that was leaked by a mistake, or if it's receiving a forged IS path, which is a hijack, but IS path was modified to look like a leak. So with this in mind, we cannot distinguish leaks and hijacks from the receiver side. And the only policy that can be applicable here is drop all anomalies that can be detected with ASPA. So what do we plan next? We're planning to make some proof of concept in the lab. We haven't yet decided how to do it. We are still in discussion. At this point, we need to bump the version of RTR protocol. Unfortunately, it's not extendable to add PDUs without increasing the version number. And it seems that if we don't find any great security flaws in the design, we're nearly ready for working group last call. Any questions? I see Rudiger is nearly going to ask a question.
Job Snyder's NTT. Why did you put the deprecate AS set configuration set reference on this slide?
It's a good question. It's my question to you, to the working group. Because it's for a proper IS path verification, we cannot verify IS set segments because they are unordered. And if we want to get rid of malicious activity that may happen in BGP, we need to get rid of IS sets. And that's why it's here. And that's why I would like to learn what's happening with this draft, and if there is anybody willing to push it forward to finally get rid of IS sets. Because from the security perspective, we are relying on this piece of document. And I even know that the authors of these documents are here.
Well, okay. You are much larger when you wrote it.
Go. So I mean, that's been sitting around for a long time, that document, and mainly Sriram had been bumping the version number every now and then. What we decided at some point was, and Randy and I had started working on this, and then I got sidetracked again. But we'd started another document which deprecates AS sets and atomic aggregate from BGP v4. We hadn't actually got as far as publishing a version of that, but that seemed like it would be a much better thing to actually do. It turns out doing that requires all sorts of updates to BGP, like lots of remove this text, add this text, remove this text, add this text. And then, yeah, I got a little sidetracked. I mean, if it's really useful, we could look at it again, and Randy might have more to say.
Yeah, but from ASP perspective, if we will have something that will already that will state that sets are deprecated, we'll be able to say that if we see an I set, for example, apply the same policy as for the hijacks and leaks and just drop it.
I believe the current version is basically like ready if somebody wanted to adopt it and do something with it. But honestly, I haven't touched it in like, a year or something, 2 years.
Okay. I see. Yeah, I see Sriram in the line.
Sriram NIST, co-author with. I just want to add that there is a version of it which is already a BCP, and then we wanted to convert it to a standards track. So hopefully the BCP is helpful somewhat in the meantime, but we can work on it to see if we can push it through in standards track as well.
Great. I will be glad to see if this piece of work will be finally adopted and end up with the RFC status.
If nothing else happens, as far as I can tell, the interesting construct only occurs at the very end of the path.
Are you speaking about this thing?
No. The IS set. And the way it usually is constructed is not relevant here at all. And if nothing else happens, one would need to check that, yes, it only can happen at the end. And then you could essentially just use the regular path for whatever's happening here. Assume that the first regular AS that shows up in the path and the set is hidden behind it to be the origin, and you are fine. Because all the tricky stuff that is happening inside the AS set does absolutely not fit into this model anyway. And it doesn't matter.
Yes, I do agree with you. But at the moment, the specification does not say anything about if I set in the middle of the ICE path is valid or invalid. Yeah. So to fight forged ICE path, we should avoid at least ICE sets in the middle. I do agree.
Okay, and as far as I have observed them, they never were somewhere in the middle. And there is a good reason for that. Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. Huh? Yeah. Well, okay. Unfortunately, I don't have. Well, okay. Yes. Let me put it into a question. Would it improve the understanding of the whole thing if we did a part in the documents that essentially reveals the concept of what is signed in the ASPAs, the complex ASN1 use typically confuses people who don't need to work with it. And I think that the conceptual data structure that is transmitted there and what its supposed semantics are could be exposed much better, and I somewhat assume actually the structure will, after the encoding, might actually change to adapt closer to the concept that's being used.
Are you speaking about IS0? No?
Yeah. Well, okay. What is the concept that is being used? You are coding sets of ASs. And you are doing some strange trick in case you want to code an empty set. Kind of why not actually explain this and then code like it?
I remember that we had this question discussed. We discussed privately. So my idea when I was writing it, introducing IS0, was I was taking a look at raw document and just taking its design to look similar. So there is row 0 and we have ASP 0. I'm not saying that it is
well, okay.
the final solution, but anyway, it's very simple. And from perspective of the coding tools, it doesn't really matter. Do you have sets or do you have separate records? From the implementation side, it's nearly the same.
You're not
going to configure it by yourself.
Well, okay. All small matters of coding agreed for making people understand what they are supposed to do and why things work well. Kind of coding complications can be an obstacle. And yes, I also have another now unhidden agenda. If we actually are coding sets of ASs, that means that during the time the standard is being developed and code and implementation and deployment follows over a couple of months. Actually, the concept could be used by people who agree on how to code in other ways that are already available, the sets of ASs, to actually use the technique kind of essentially immediately.
Yeah, but anyway, generating, for example, using ice path filtering using wildcards, you will anyway end up with some generator of your configuration. I'm pretty sure that you will not use CLI to configure it, and so it should not really matter if you are working with a set or a set of tuples.
The issue here is much less the coding, which may be slightly easier or harder, or, well, okay, it doesn't matter, and I completely agree that, yes, completely hand-coding stuff is out of the question, but making the concept that is used transparent to users actually is valuable, because, well, okay, of course, with a little bit of coding, the user interface can also present concepts that are kind of hidden in what's happening underneath, but that does not really help.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
kind of for details, offline discussion quite obviously makes sense.
So thank you, Rudiger, for your comments.
A real quick question. Sorry about that, Tim. If you take AS configs out, do you want to propose what should be done if an AS config is encountered?
So
is it simply ignore it and go to the next AS in the AS sequence?
If we are speaking about protection against malicious activity, a forged ICE set in the middle of the path just nivelates all kinds of protection, because it will end up that you are able to create a forged ICE path in certain situations. So at the moment, the draft suggests to treat paths with ICE set like it treats hijacks and leaks.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, question for clarification, because I want to check that my understanding is correct. Tim Wijzels and All Labs. So, in my understanding, the semantics here are similar to what you have in origin validation, in the sense that you would argue to drop invalid, so if there's anything verifiably invalid, but when things are unknown, that's okay.
Yes.
Right, okay. Because the text in the document seemed to say something about treating unverifiable things with some suspicion, and I'm not sure that that's...
There is difference between unverifiable and unknown.
Right.
Unverifiable is exactly introduced for ISETs.
Right. Okay.
Unknown is for ISPath. Yes. So the ISPath even returns, I think, valid in case of... So there is, for pair verification, there is 3 outcomes: valid, invalid, unknown. For ISPath verification procedure, it should be valid, invalid, and unverifiable. So the unknown will be valid.
Right. Okay. That clarifies. Thank you.
But thank you for comment. I will check that it is clearly stated.
Maybe somewhat related, but we can also talk about that offline. But there is an AS who makes a statement here, a signed statement. And I asked earlier, like, maybe we should think about how to make that object, because what I'm looking for, what I'm thinking of is atomicity here. If as an AS I make a statement, maybe I want one object signed by an AS that has everything in it to ensure that I see the complete policy that's applicable here, and not risk that there are issues with a bunch of objects where some of them are being published and withdrawn, and so that may be something to think about. Because with ROAS, that's different, because if you put multiple prefixes on a single ROA and one of the prefixes goes away, then the object becomes invalid. But if this is signed by only one AS, then you don't have that problem. So you may want to think about that.
I'm not sure that I properly get your question. Let's discuss it offline.
Yes. What I'm implying is that maybe if one AS makes a statement or a bunch of statements, they can put them all in one object.
But it can, a single AS may create objects only for originating autonomous system number. So you are creating objects for your providers. You can create more objects. But anyway, you're creating objects only for your providers.
So what I'm implying is that as the AS who is signing, I could put all those statements on a single object. So there's no risk that when I publish things, you miss things because, you know, it's still being processed and it's partially published, etc. So it's not a big deal, but, you know, maybe something to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff Houston, look, I'm not sure that I actually need a single object. The underlying constraint is if you sign one of your adjacencies, you need to sign all of your adjacencies. Okay, how can I be adjacent to an AS set and what might it look like? And this is this sort of weird thing where you're kind of go, I need AS sets deprecated, but I actually don't even understand how, if I'm signing all my adjacencies, how I can sign myself as adjacent to an AS set within your construct. And maybe that just simply finesses out the entire issue of AS sets, because I can't be adjacent to one unless a whole bunch of other work is done to define what I'm adjacent to. So if I sign all my adjacencies and you see a path with me adjacent to one of these AS sets, I think that's a dud, you know, straight away. Thanks.
I'd like to state it one more time. The problem with ISET in the path is that it is unordered. It's not the numbers in it.
But it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. I mean, you're inside an environment where whenever you get a path, until you reach some golden halcyon day that's never going to happen, that everyone signs stuff, you're going to have to do partials. Yes. And if you're doing partials, no one's going to be incorporating. If I do my signing, I'm never adjacent to a set, the problem just goes away. That's what I'm suggesting. Chris, you can have the time.
I'm not sure that I fully get your idea. I will try to reach you later. Thank you.
Quick. Jared Mach, Akamai. I don't know how many AS adjacencies I have. It's actually an unknown, it's an unanswerable question for me. So I don't know, I wouldn't even have a way to sign something to say who I'm adjacent with, because I peer with things like route servers. So I have very many unknown AS adjacencies just for my backbone AS.
But how many upstream providers do you have? We are not speaking about signing all adjacencies. We are speaking about only signing your IP transit providers.
It is still a little bit indeterminate. That I might be able to answer, but some of the people, the agreement, it looks like peering, but it may actually be more like transit. So sometimes the business relationships are a little bit fuzzy.
We're not trying to define complex business relationships. The only thing that ASP does is, if you create a record, you are just permitting what is called provider to send your prefixes to upstreams or peers and so on. You are free, for example, not to permit one of your providers to send prefixes. You can do it. It's up to you. So the core idea is that, yes, you never know all your agencies. Because of transparent access, it's not possible. But to list your providers, I think 99% of ISPs in the world will be capable to do it.
Okay. There's a bunch of conversation that probably needs to go on the mailing list for this. I think it would be a lot more helpful. Daniel. Clicker. No gift. Okay.
So I would like to present to you our draft again. I have been at the last IETF meeting at Prague. So this time I will give you an update, and we would like to go for last call soon to finish this draft. So this is about how to use RPKI validation at route servers and how to forward the result to the peers. So the draft is around for already about 3 years, more than 3 years. And there have been some substantial changes inside, like added modes of operation, how to do it at the route server, and how to forward the result to the peers. So the last feedback from the IETF 104 is basically about which community to use and which mode of operation to run at default. The motivation for this draft was basically to have something like RFC 1897, which says how to forward RPKI validation results in interior BGP. So at IXPs, we already have some kind of similar situation. We run kind of a more trusted environment to the peers. And it's natural for IXPs to forward some information with routes. For example, where the route has been learned from, how far, like what's the round trip time to that route, things like that. So we would like to do the same with RPKI, to tag the result of RPKI onto the route. So that would make sense to make routing decisions for monitoring, troubleshooting, maintenance, or just to record it to have educational or to do some research about it. So just to get a picture on how it works, some of you already know it. We get a prefix from, for example, ASD that goes into the route server. The route server is doing all its usual checks, also doing RRD checks, see if the prefix is valid for the AS, if it's in its AS set. And additionally, this time it will also do RPKI validation. Then it can have different modes. For example, it can drop the prefix right away, or it can just forward the prefixes and tag the state, the result of the state, onto the route to the neighbors. And then it should go to the neighbors, but the neighbors shouldn't redistribute this to others. It's just the idea to have this at the domain of the IXP. So technically, we now changed from an extended community to a large community because this has been feedback from the last IETF meeting, and it's now a standard. So basically, it would be, we would have the ROA validation status at the last field, which would be like 0 for if it's a valid prefix, 1 if it's not found, if it's unknown, or 2 if it's an invalid prefix. We would also have the function-specific number to signal that this is the APKI prefix validation community, and we would have the ASN of the IXP, for example, that is distributing this validation result. Inside the route server, there would be different modes of operation available. The first mode would be to just tag the result that the route server processed onto the route and distribute it to the peers. The second mode of operation would be to drop all invalid prefixes and just forward valid ones and unknowns. So this would be now the default mode of operation and is basically like what is done today at several IXPs. And the third mode would be to drop prefixes with invalid and unknown, but basically do the best path selection after that, so that valid routes would remain like on top of all others. Operational recommendations in the draft is that peers that receive the result should not redistribute it to other ASNs. If a route server is receiving such a community from a peer, it should strip it so that it will not redistribute other checks. Then what's also a comment is that if the origin validation fails at the route server, the community should be omitted. There should be no community. And then if there's multiple validation results for a peer, if it receives multiple validation results, the validation result with the highest value should be taken. That would be 2 for invalid, for example. So it's the most secure way to do it. So comments from the last meeting have been that we shouldn't, or there should be a mechanism to signal if the validation couldn't be performed at the route server. And we have this now in the operational recommendations to omit the community tag at the route server. Then one comment was that the draft has been overtaken by reality, which means that now more and more IXPs already drop invalids. But I see it like this, that things of the draft are now already implemented, kind of this. And we also define the communities to tag on. And also if you go, for example, to the looking glass, you can see at some IXPs that they're already using communities. You can't just see, you don't see it on your router, but you see that internally the route server is already using these communities. Then we had a discussion about extended and large communities. We now decided in favor for large communities. There was always the concern of outsourcing security. That means that you are giving like the security decision to the route server, but this is some trade-off that our peers doing anyway at IXPs, and there's kind of a trusted relationship. And then also discussion was always to drop invalids by default, which we now adopted in the draft. Yeah. So with this, I'm open to more comments, and as I said, we would like to finish this draft fairly soon.
Doug Montgomery, but back one slide, what's the scenario where you get 2 validation results? It was like the last bullet of the previous slide.
Yeah, the last point here.
What's the scenario and when this happens?
If your router is maybe peering with different route servers and there's 2 giving you different results of the validation for a prefix.
So let me try. There's 2 route servers at DKIX. I appear with both of them. They happen to be unsynced with their perspective of the RPKI data. One says valid, one says unknown. What should I do?
Yeah, that would be like a failure scenario. Yeah, true.
Well, okay, but these would be 2 different routes. And actually figuring out that you have 2 routes with different communities, I'm not aware of any of the currently available configuration language to have appropriate policy language.
I think we've talked about this before, but not in this context. You have no guarantee that the highest value, if highest, is valid. I think that was why you have no guarantee that that is the more recent data, right?
Okay, time-wise, I don't know, but basically, if it would be at the same time, you should favor the higher value.
I wasn't suggesting a race condition. I'm saying the idea that you choose the one with the more favorable validation result isn't a sign that you're choosing the one that has the more up-to-date RPKI information, right? Things could be effectively degrading.
Yeah, it would be in favor of security, I think, in this case.
I think, Doug, your point is that as the data in the RPKI is changing over time, I may choose to authorize you to do this route today and Job tomorrow, and not you tomorrow. And if the data at the two different route servers is in a state where one has the old data, you, and the other one has the new data, Job, I certainly don't want to accept the route with you in it anymore.
Can I inject in this, or Robochernist? We made an awful lot of tests last year about that, and you can have the following situation. Let's assume you have a router on the East Coast, and you have a router on the West Coast, and they exchange their data and they have the same path. Both have two different validation caches. I don't know which of the validation cache has the more up-to-date data. It might be that the one that results in a valid is more up-to-date than the one that has the other result. It also might be that the one with the invalid has more up-to-date data than the one with the valid. So I cannot say just because I think out of security, because it might be a security that caused a certain prefix to be all of a sudden valid. So what now?
Okay, I take this as a good comment for the draft. Thank you.
Job Snijders, NTT. In the case of failure in the origin validation process, for instance, how do you define failure of the origin validation process? Because, for instance, if the cache is empty, policy will dictate that all of them become unknown. And then omitting the community is a fourth signal in this construct that contradicts with what we understand that unknowns are or not found. So we cannot differentiate, I think, between a failure in the origin validation process or the absence of a validation process.
Yeah, I see this problem as well.
And then a second comment, if the default is to reject invalids, maybe you should remove the well-known invalid community. And then only two communities are left, the unknowns and valids. And at that point, I kind of wonder what the use case is, because I think it's not very valuable. And you should reconsider the words that we can trust each other at an internet exchange. I fully agree from a commercial incentive if I were working for an internet exchange, but we in the transit world say transit is what you trust.
Okay, so you shouldn't use route servers at all.
John Scudder. Now that you explained what the last bullet means, I would like to agree with Rudiger that one route has one validation state. It doesn't make sense to talk about having multiple validation states for a route. And as I understand, I would need to go and I haven't looked at this version of the draft, so I don't know what the normative language is, but it sounds to me like that should just be removed, because it doesn't make sense to say that a route has two different validation states. It only has one, and it's the one that the route server told me.
All right, thank you.
Randy Bushai, Jan Arcus. I have problems with the trust model also, but that's been beaten to death. Why you switched which community confuses me. We already have a well-known one, or pardon me, not well-known one, but a well-defined one. But basically, as you'll see, the real problem that's expressed in the origin validation signaling draft, which you'll get to hear about boringly later, is that sending the community gets to my router, but then what do I do if it's invalid? Okay, and the problem is that I want to cause withdrawal. And we haven't quite got the route map semantics for that.
Yeah, the community was changed because of the comments from the last meeting. So I understood that this is the right way to go, and the default thing that is also done at route servers. So otherwise, I understood that if we want to have extended communities, like it's done with the IBGP draft, you have to implement all the policies, and we have to wait like 10 years. So yeah, we thought this is the way to go. All right, no more comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Tim, I believe it is your turn. Let me find your... Aha. Oopsie. The clicker thing, let me make this to go to full screen.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, Tim Beuzels and Nomad Labs. I'm going to talk about this draft, which is actually not in last call, as far as I know, but it is on the status pages. I think that's because HTTPS entails was in last call. So it would be nice to rectify that, because this is not finished. So goals still. This is similar to the slide deck I presented 2 meetings ago, where I said, shall we call it done? But still not done. And I'll get back to that in a bit, actually. But let's first look at the goals. So we want to allow for key roles in the RPKI. There are many reasons why, but this might be useful. I used to work for RightNCC, where I was operating a trust anchor, and we had a vendor lock-in with regards to an HSM. So that's just one of the reasons why this might be useful. For relying parties, it's important to learn about these things. Currently, there's no way except for somehow offline learning about a new trust anchor locator and including it. Maybe when you update your implementation, you get a new tel with that update, but it's not very well defined. So we also want to learn from experience in the DNS. We'd like to have a way for this to be done that lands well into the existing standards, so it works well with what's out there. Finally, leave a trail for outdated clients. What I mean by that is that if you have a piece of software that has a trust anchor locator in it, so that's basically the way your relying party tool finds the current certificate. Well, if that's outdated, it would be very nice if you can follow a trail to the current set of trust anchors that should be applicable. So there was a major comment on version 2 in Singapore, which is, when is it safe? When do you know that you can actually drop an old key? So changes in 3 are, well, I hope that the text is more clear. I could ask you for a show of hands who actually try to read it. No? Yeah? Okay, great. Well, I'll go through the phases here on the slide deck as well, actually. But I try to make the document a bit more clear with regards to what's going on. I mean, we're starting from a situation where none of this is applicable. How do you start to use this, and how do you then use it to make a role in a planned direction? How do you use it to make a role in an unplanned direction, let's say? As mentioned back in Singapore as well, the draft now uses distinct URIs for where you can retrieve the TA certificates in an attempt to help figure out how many people are actually learning about this stuff and how many people support the standard, if it becomes one. Now, the objects, this is ASM1. This may be a bit painful for people, but essentially it says that there has to be one or more current keys. The current key is defined as a sequence of, or a sequence of a certificate URIs, so it's a bunch of URIs and subject public key info. In effect, that's exactly the same information as you find on a tel file, but in ASM1 DR format rather than clear text. You can also have 0 or more revoked keys. So, current situation, you have none of this, right? You have the trust anchor locator file, clear text file. It contains a bunch of URIs and the subject public key info of a trust anchor certificate. So relying party uses that to fetch a certificate, verifies it, and it goes off. A way to introduce this in a phase 1, let's say, is add a what we call a tag file, to confuse tal and tag less, I suppose, where a signed object has a reference, a URI to a location where the trust anchor certificate is signed and the same subject public key info. Now, when a relying party tool runs, they will encounter this, and the text in the document currently says, well, when you learn about these signed statements, you should use the information in there to replace what you had obtained earlier from the clear text file you were using. Now, if you use different URIs for both, then as an operator, you can learn where people fetch things. So you can also understand somehow how many people would be able to, follow a trail, let's say. So that's the more significant change, I think, in this version of the document. If you go on, though, for completeness, you can then add a new key, have new tag files, as they're called, referencing both keys. You could have tell files for both entry points, let's say, but probably if you intend to roll to key 2 here, you might want to reach out to relying party software to include that in the distribution. Or you could actually technically even have a discussion about, using the signed format in that respect. Then, going further, you can roll to a third key and revoke the first. An awful lot of drawings in here, and I'm not sure that we can have a discussion about this if people want, but I did present this before. The main takeaway here is that I can revoke that first key on the tag file of the second. I don't need to do that on the third, because people who learn about the third key will have already learned about the revocation of the first by looking at the second. The reason that complication is there is because I'd like to avoid having to have a long trail of what are all the previous revoked keys. We could still include that, but it might make the object bigger than is strictly necessary. The document actually distinguishes 2 ways here. You could say, okay, we want to revoke key 1, so TA here, or you could say, well, actually the one that we just introduced is no longer good. And it would technically look the same from a relying party point of view. Both current keys are just treated equally as current, essentially. And either key can revoke all the others. Now, the document actually allows for any number of keys, and this is another question I think I have for the group as well. While that leaves makes the document flexible, I think it also makes it more complicated than strictly necessary. If we could constrain this to scenarios where you only ever have 2 keys, that might make things a lot simpler. So that may be well worth it. Now, then, what's next? Well, almost that. I thought I included something, but no, it's in my mind. I actually want to do real proof of concept work on this, and I had planned to do that earlier, but I didn't get around to it. I'm still busy with some other things, but I really hope to get there, because I don't feel confident, asking for last call on this unless I have running code that proves that, okay, we can do a roll where we went on with our intent. We do a roll where we figured, no, this new key is no longer good, and I want to verify that, following the trail actually works. So even though it takes longer, I would rather, do it well than rush it. And and I'm not entirely sure that I can promise when I will get to it. But, status update, that's where I want to go. So question to the chairs, I suppose, would be, please get rid of the status last call, because I don't think it's there. And to anybody else, I mean, if you have comments, ideas, concerns, like, our little friend here, please speak up. It can be here, it can be in the hallways, on the mailing list, wherever. Or if you want to help test, that's also great, of course. So with that, the floor is yours.
Hey, Eric Osterwald, George Mason University. So I think this is really good. I really like the approach you've taken, and also the fact that you're highlighting a problem that I think exists in DNSSEC, among other places, where understanding what a key role is proving to be very difficult, because it wasn't very clear when the protocol was designed that key role is a really big thing. It's more than just sticking a key out there and using it and then sticking a new key out there and using it. They actually wind up having a relationship to each other after they've been cycled out, and whether they're still valid, they become replay vulnerabilities. I think there's a lot of thinking through, are you rolling forward, are you rolling backward, and how do you actually represent that I think I like the fact that you're going to do a lot of analysis. I think you might also sort of think through what are the various states that the resource is going to be in as keys change, and whether keys exist and you rolled forward, backward, and coming up with a taxonomy for that. I'd be happy to work with you on that if you want.
Sure.
Randy Bush, IJ Anarchist. Like well enough that would like to see early security area reviews, and suggest the chairs go find some friends over there.
Yes. Rob Ostine, Arcus. To your question about whether or not you can simplify it with getting rid of some of those infinite linked sequences, given you're talking about prototyping at first, which I think is a highly advisable thing, leave it as open-ended sequences for now. And if it turns out you don't actually need all those slots, then yeah, trim them, because we've been seeing all kinds of entertaining things lately with people pushing things that were not envisioned as more than 3 entries up to 10,000 and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Maarten Aartsen, NCSC, the Dutch one. Let's see. So you just talked about keys being able to revoke other keys, and that's the security considerations says that currently any key can revoke any other key. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about this too, and I'm wondering if you want to roll a key because you are not sure that it's safe anymore, for example, that's the property you're looking for. And I don't know what the property is that you're looking for, but yeah, this basically made me question how that works. So I know that in the TLS working group that they tried to get some of the academic formal proof groups look at some parts of the protocol. I'm wondering if that's useful to be trying to do here with the PKI bit, to try and understand if the properties you're looking for are provided by the functionality you're modeling. And I'm not sure if anyone's willing and able to do that, but I guess this is a time where you can easily fix oversights. So just questions, I suppose.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for pointers, because, speaking for myself, I'm just making this up and hoping it, works. So I can definitely use good advice. Sorry, I should keep it at a consistent distance, right? But in terms of what we had in mind is, well, one of the thoughts is that if you have an HSM, you're usually well protected against key theft, let's say. But you may still want to do planned rules because, you want to change hardware, but you can still lose a key as well. In particular, like if you use card sets or people to protect key 1, then, you may not have a quorum anymore. And you may still have that quorum for key 2, and you don't know for sure that it's going to go that direction. So those are some of the concerns here about, why do this? At the same time, a lot of this relies on operational procedures about how do you manage your keys, right? Because in theory, of course, if you have multiple keys and they can all revoke each other, then you just need to have, own one of these keys to wreak havoc. And clearly that can introduce, bigger security risks. So I think there's a trade-off here, and I'm not sure that I have all the answers, but I'm hoping that the use of HSMs will actually help in this regard, and strong processes. But I don't think having this is enough. you need to have all kinds of other, especially processes, I think.
Yeah, your slide sparked my thought, because you mentioned just now that you didn't want to revoke key 1 with package 2 and 3. So that made me think about this. So if you don't want like the newest key to revoke, then maybe it doesn't have to be able to, or so you can think about that kind of property. And
well, if you're referring to the one where I said only key 2 needs to revoke key 1, that was mainly because you only need to learn about key 1's revocation once. And so that was an attempt to stop, the object from becoming really huge if you, theoretically do dozens of these roles.
Last 2 questions, then we'll move to the next.
Okay. Sandy Murphy, Parsons. I'm standing at the far mic because I'm asking a question from a position of ignorance, and in case you want to throw things. I have been impressed at the amount of effort it took to do the DNSSEC key roll. So this is a really good idea to get an early start on considering here. And so thank you very much for starting the work. I also remember the difficulty that there was in the CIDR working group to define the algorithm change documents from very long ago. So what happens if your key role is also an algorithm role? Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, good answer.
Rob Ostine, Arcus again. I haven't reread this recently, so I don't know if you've already covered it, Tim. My apologies. But one of the things that was a consideration at the liberty, taking the liberty of speaking from what I think Mike St. John's was intending with the RC 5011 for DNSSEC was the ability to pre-publish keys before really using them. And that's basically because no one really knows how to do an emergency key roll. An emergency key roll for real, an unplanned one, is basically burn it to the ground and start over, which kind of sucks. So what you do instead is an accelerated schedule planned key roll, which kind of requires you get for it to work well, you need to get the next key out there early. Part of the reason I'm bringing this up now is the question about whether or not there really should be some ordering in these keys so that you can't have the old one revoke the new one. We probably want to put that into the bucket while we're thinking this through. I think they're all good questions. I'm just not sure what the answer is yet.
Yep. Fair enough.
All right, thank you very much. Next up is Mr. Bush. Unless he ran away. Didn't run away. Haha. You tell me, which one would you like to do? That one or that one?
Don't care whatever comes up.
Oh, you know what?
You got the old ones, right? Yep, with the wrong title on the right foil on. Jesus, I want a refund.
God damn. Pardon my French. All right.
Origin validation signaling matches the draft title. We are cruising. Okay.
With the mic.
We had a presentation.
Well, look, Mike.
Okay. Better?
Yes.
Okay. So, as was kind of mentioned in a previous talk, there was RFC 8097 with an extended community for origin validation signaling. It kind of looked like this. And how does the receiver drop invalids? Yeah, I got the message. I gave you a prefix. You wrote back and you said it sucked. What do? Cry? Okay, so I want to drop invalids as if I had detected it myself running origin validation. Okay, that should be the effect, kind of. In fact, even slightly more strongly, I should withdraw all the announcements where I actually sent out the garbage, right? So think a route reflector with lazy clients. The clients don't run origin validation. But it would be nice if they understood this community and actually knew how to act on it. And this isn't policy. This is actual behavior change. I'm getting a scowl from John. And that's why, because it sounds like work. Okay? And it's not just the route reflector situation, but here in this draft, we specifically talk about trust boundary. Okay? It's only within a POP. It's not outsourcing it. Okay? Do not share your needles with customers or friends. Okay? So here's where we kind of differ with the route server issue. Okay? Hello? Okay. As route of origin validation deploys, we really want to do something like this. It would be a bit of an accelerator, make it easy for some people, etc. Okay? And we'd like to request WG adoption. You also want an email to the list, or will that do?
Please email the list because I will forget in about now.
Can you remember to go to the next presentation?
Oh, because you just said so. Do you have questions before?
Hi,
John Scudder. I want to explain why I was scowling, which wasn't the reason you said, I don't think. If I understood your summary slides correctly,
you're scowling because of withdraw the ones I already announced.
Right. That should be a natural consequence of a policy that says I'm not accepting this.
I already
route.
accept. No, the problem is I'm a route reflector
Yeah.
client.
Yeah.
Care gave me a route.
Yeah.
I accepted it.
Yeah.
I pass it to the route reflector.
Right.
The route reflector says, "Eh," and sends the signal back to me.
To you. Yeah. Thank you.
To me. Okay. And I've already accepted and re-announced the
Now I understand what you're asking for. I don't think I like it, but I'll think about it for a while.
That is why I thought that's what you were scowling at. This is work, and slightly ugly work, because it's not only that announcement, but it's all the other announcements of the same prefix with the same origin. Right. Yep.
Job Snyder's NTT. So you're kind of sticking BGP withdrawals for off-link peers into a BGP community?
No.
Because what the route reflector, so the route reflector decides this is invalid. It sends a signal back to the spoke. That could be, I don't know, a well-known community or a new attribute.
No, it's the community that's already documented and defined. We're just saying the semantics weren't complete.
Treats what it received from the eBGP peer as a withdrawal, and then it will send withdrawals to the other route servers.
No.
Maybe Kara can say it better.
Route reflector, when it receives routes from its clients, will run a best path and will announce a best path. When it does, the community tags on top of it to say what is wrong with it. Now, route reflector could say path 1 is the best, but path 4 that I just received had a bad community. So it could do add paths and piggyback path 4 and say this is wrong, take it back, which will be, the net result will be same, but it could also send it on the path 1, which was the best path. That is what Randy is trying to say, I think.
The spoke receives the signal. Then what does it do? It should perform origin validation?
No. The point is, when the spoke receives the signal, it withdraws, it drops the invalid as if it had detected it, but it has no cache feeding it.
So
And
it treats
withdraw any
it as
announcements
withdrawal.
it may have made with that invalid origin.
In other words, this is signaling withdrawals over BGP communities.
In a sense, it's signaling asking you to withdraw it.
Chaired Matcha Akamai. And then it decides, oh, I might have seen this again because somebody did soft reconfig or route refresh, and now I'm going to send it back up and loop it and create a message loop. This sounds potentially very scary and messy.
Actually, what Randy is trying to say, and I'm channeling him, so keep me honest. When a edge router receives an extended community, for that given prefix on an edge router, for all the paths, it will go and loop and say, wherever you find AS path which is incorrect, mark that path ineligible for best path. Rerun the best path, and then announce that new best path back to the route reflector, so that if someone does a route refresh in again, you always send out the right path. Does that make sense?
Maybe I have 10 minutes for 2 presentations, gentlemen.
Yep. Yeah, which
We have a mailing
which
list.
may be none, and it may. Yeah, I could see this getting very messy very quick.
I had a second question. If we're going to modify the edges to accommodate the behavior, why not just implement origin validation? And I don't mean to be cocky, but
No. That's perfectly valid. That's my personal instinct, of course. But there are others who've said otherwise. They want to have more centralized control at that level, just as they have single or paired validators in a POP. Rudiger, I'm sorry to be rude, but I have another presentation. How am I doing for time? For the second presentation. Can we move along, please? Sorry, gentlemen. That's the next button. Pluck the magic twanger. Okay. Update the content on the thingy.
The
Go
meeting
for it.
materials are correct. This just is wrong. But it's only the title.
I see.
Right?
What
That's all
he's
you change
saying
the title.
is that, I sent him the email on this that he asked for. This says signaling, what this says egress. So that's just a very funny spelling of egress. Ignore it. This is incited by Professor Volk. So the problem is the origin AS may be modified by outbound policy. And also note that the origin AS is null when it's preparing to be announced. Okay? So it will definitely be modified by outbound policy for if it's being originated here. Okay? So we want policy semantics based on validation should be applied separately to distribution into BGP, which we've already defined and kind of have running, and separately to egress. Because I can munge the path, change the effective origin. I could have a selection of ASs on this router, and I'm the originator. And I choose which one I'm going to tag, etc. So I want to be able to apply origin validation to what I'm about to announce. Because I don't want to hear from Warren's knock when I've got bad breath. Okay? So, when applied to egress, the effective origin AS, and note that's the effective origin AS, must be used to determine the origin validation state. And Yes, I will send you an email to request adoption.
Thank you very much.
No extra charge. Mike?
Go on.
I will.
Mr. Manderson. So I don't have a fun slide for you, so I'll just go back to the schedule slide.
Thank you for your time. So my name's Terry. I'm a root server operator. I'll be very clear that I only speak for myself as a root server operator and for the root server that I operate. I will not speak for any other root server operator. I want to draw your attention. I am talking about DNS, and there's a reason I'm talking about DNS. I'll get to it in a minute. Yes. Yes, root. Not route. So there's a lot of push to do RPKI because you'll look better, you'll grow your hair back, and you'll be more attractive to the opposite sex. All those sorts of things, and that's fantastic. There are two documents I'd like to draw your attention to just slightly. You may not understand where they come from, but you can Google them and find them. There's something called RSAC 021. RSAC is the Root Server System Advisory Committee. And RSAC 021 essentially says that the failure of one root server operator is not critical to the operation of the entire internet. And that's good. There's a second document, RSAC 042, which says things about the independence of root server operators. And one of those things that it discusses is that root server operators will be diverse in their operations and their network operations and infrastructures. So, now I think about this, and this is my perspective only, no one else's. Someone might share it, but this is my observation, is that if the root server operators all do RPKI, they are then impacted should one of the 5 TAs have a situation. More so right now, if one particular operator, TA operator, RPKI operator, has an issue, it will affect 9 root server operators. Discuss.
Hi, Terry. This is Florian.
Hi, Florian.
Nice to see you. I'm also a root server operator. And I learned about this about 5 minutes ago. So what I figured out with Natalie's and Robert's help from the NCC is, it turns out even if you're not doing RPK, if you don't have an ROA, you still have a problem. Because someone can get a ROA.
Ben Madison, work online. I presume the single TA operator that you refer to is Aaron, and that's because that's where most of the...
It doesn't matter who it is. It's arbitrary.
Well,
whether there's 12 organizations that operate root servers, there's only 5 organizations that currently do that. In this current model, okay, I'm not trying to propose any solutions. That's not my job here. My job is just to highlight that I see that there is a diversity issue.
Yeah. No, I was asking to make sure I was understanding the problem, as you said. This is presumably exacerbated by the fact that all 5 are claiming root in their root CAs at the moment.
No, not necessarily. It would actually also exist if there was a single trust anchor. And it could be worse.
Sure.
But it's still.
So you don't see this being improved from a diversity perspective by having the numbers from which the root servers come from more widely spread amongst the...
So evenly
RIRs.
distributed? I don't see it as it's better, but it's not ideal, in my opinion. Again, this is all my opinion, my observations.
Job Snyders, NCT. I have trouble grasping the problem. There are 5 root certificates, and there are 13 26 prefixes, and you can distribute the 26 under the 5 tiles. And that's not enough diversity.
Can you do the numbers for your first 2 RSAC documents, please?
021.
Sorry, no, not those numbers. The internal numbers, like the first one was, it's okay if one root server has disappeared.
Yeah.
And the second one is?
The first one is it's okay if there is one root server operator fails. The second one is a principle that's set for the operation of root server operators, and that is that root server operators will have diversity in their operations, inclusive of network and stuff like that.
So if you sign half of them, not sign the other half, and distribute amongst the multiple RARs, you're done, right?
I don't know. Is that the answer that Sidrops would recommend?
Is that within our mandate?
This is where you operate RPKI and CIDR and stuff. This is where your expertise is. It's not my expertise.
In that case, I would recommend you try to transfer at least one IPv6 prefix to another region as an experiment to see if you can obtain access to other certificates.
Hello, my name is Carlos. I work for LACNIC, one of the 5 RARs. We would happily welcome you guys. I mean, we have policies that allow us to assign prefixes for critical infrastructure that can be used outside of our region, and I believe the other 4 have similar policies. My comment is that I don't think that's a problem for us to solve. I mean, as Sidrops, I think if you have 9 prefixes within a single IRR, you guys are a bit weak on the diversity aspect that you apparently are defending on one of the documents. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, you could roll IPs in some of the root servers, distribute them among the RARs. You could get new space from us. You could transfer, like Job said. There are a bunch of ways in you could actually create more diversity in that aspect of the root server operations.
Maybe someone should write a document that defines some things that you should do. There's no advice. There's no advice about this to date.
You know what? I have my statement for applying to RSAC in my computer. I've had it for a while. I think this is the right time to submit.
Maybe it is.
Terry, can I ask another clarifying question for the
Of course you can.
Okay. It sounds to me like you're using the root servers as an example organization. And
I'm not using the root servers as an example.
Okay, sorry, you're using your root
I have a problem.
Okay.
Okay, I have people telling me that I need to do RPKI. I am nervous as heck about doing it because I don't want to end up on the front of Time magazine.
Too late. So they don't make a magazine anymore. I think the
Damn it.
I guess where I was trying to go is there are some things that are sort of hot button topics, and maybe the issue is not necessarily a root server problem. This is a general network operations problem. If I operate a large resource on the internet or something that's interesting to me from a business perspective, I have to have redundancy, diversity, failover sort of capability. And my business continuity plan maybe didn't take into account that I have all of my resources in one RIR.
I wasn't making that point, but if you want to adopt that, that's fine.
Okay.
I was making a point simply for my own operations. As selfish and lack of altruism as that is, that's where it was.
Okay.
Robert.
Hi, Robert Kistakira, IPNCC. I am not a root operator. I have friends who are. 3 things. First, what Chris said. I don't think that the root servers are any special in this context. Just a statement.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
I don't like the idea of golden numbers and stuff as well. So.
That's fine. Second statement, we went through the scenarios over lunch, and I'm happy to talk to you or anyone who's interested, or we can form some kind of committee, whatever. But the end result of the discussion was that no operator can be worse off than today if they also have ROAS and RPKI. They may be better off, but they will not be worse off in case of attacks and so on. Okay, it's not just every day, but if shit hits the fan. I'm happy to talk about it, as I said. The third statement is that it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but root operators already synchronize on protocols and everything they do. You all run IPv4, IPv6, BGP, blah, blah, blah. So you might want to, if you want to diversify, then you might want to do IPX or something.
Yeah, that's pretty much tongue-in-cheek.
Doug Montgomery, just to be clear, so you're afraid of either accidental or malicious ROAs being created that cause other folk to drop your route, or?
It could be anything. I'm
trying to understand the threat scenario, which doesn't cause.
All right, I understand that. It could be an operational failure at the entity that is signing. So,
which
might be
your resources to become unknown?
It would become invalid. If it becomes invalid, then the route would be...
Those people who are filtering invalid can't reach you on that address.
Correct. Especially if the people who are filtering are a transit. Then all of their customers can't reach.
Be a good slurm value.
Randy Bush, IJ Narcus. First, for everybody else, suggestions that involve a root server changing its IP address are for after I'm dead. The protocol, if you get farbled, I don't care. There are 12 other root servers. So doing drastic structural action in the RPKI or the protocol doesn't get a lot of sympathy. Thirdly, I would refer you to about a 3-year-old presentation that shows you how to escape Aaron. All my resources are ripe. All my V4 and V6 are in ripe. Oh, not my V6 because it's not my V6.
I didn't mean this to be a beat up on any RIR. That's not why I...
Oh, you said you have a whole bunch of the root operators are in one RIR.
That's a facet of history.
Whatever was the cause, what I'm saying is some of them could move without changing IP addresses.
I think my key point is that even if we all moved and shuffled around, it would still be 12 organizations being compressed down into 5 organizations. So your diversity set is now 5.
It's better than 1, A, and B. I refer you to Robert, who said having your ROA is no worse than having no ROA. And your response was incorrect when you said the holder of that ROA could farble and issue a bad AS, is the detail you're worried about. And they could issue a ROA with a bad AS for you if you hadn't registered.
Rob Osstein, Arcus, 2 observations. One, you're not going to settle this or get coherent advice today. This is a little bit too new. People.
I know. I thought I'd raise it anyway.
Yeah. Other thing, though, I think you need to make a distinction between reliability and availability in the 2 services you're talking about here. The fetching and caching behavior of DNS is very different from the fetching and caching behavior of the RPKI. You can probably survive an outage of no new stuff being published in the RPKI for a while. I mean, eventually you'll start to have problems. CRLs get stale, blah, 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 blah. But if people aren't using stupidly short expiration times, you can last a few days, right? A few days of a root server being out would probably be more noticeable. So you may need to do the numbers on how long of an outage is acceptable, that sort of thing. And yeah, getting slightly better.
That's good observation. Yeah.
Getting slightly better distribution, but 12 divided by 5, there's only so much you can do.
Jeff
Houston.
accidental player inside the ICANN circus from time to time. Look, RSAC exists for a very good reason. And part of that reason is to observe, understand, and possibly recommend. You've raised an interesting issue. And part of the issue is whether you should sign and what the associated sort of issues of diversity, where the addresses get set, and so on. And I think they're great topics. And you should consider from the perspective of all 12 of you what you should do to give yourselves both diversity and maximal availability and performance and so on. And that seems to me like something that RSAC should investigate and harness resources and do study for, maybe invoking expert commentary or whatever RSAC wants to do. I think it's difficult for this group to understand the particular needs of those 12 operators or even just one in isolation. And your motivation about diversity is perhaps best studied in detail in RSAC. I'm saying in short, not here, not now.
Guess where I'm going next?
Well, great.
But wait, I didn't want to go there, and then all of a sudden, you guys get sideswiped by a random question. So I'm being polite in this situation, right?
And I think the politeness is more that RSAC might circle around either the group or one or two of the group and get some more data as they do their investigation. And that's great, and it's great that it's forewarning. As I said, it's a bit tough to say to us, solve it, because, like I said, wrong place, wrong time.
I'm not asking you to solve it. I'm asking you to think about it. That's why I said discuss. I didn't say solve. Because I actually don't think it is solvable in the sense of a protocol sense. As Randy pointed out, it would be a significant architectural change, and I don't think that is rightly appropriate, but other things can be done.
Like many things about the root server system, it's about assurance to the community that we're doing as well as we can do. State of the art is there. And, I think RSAC is perfectly capable of getting to that kind of advice without necessarily committing myself one iota to doing any work at all.
Just a note on time. We are over time, so there, whatever cookies are the next thing coming.
Vasily Zalmatov, just one general remark. It's a common thing that when you implement some mechanism to cope with some attacks, then you will have additional failures connected with a possible failure of that mechanism. It's obvious you should leave that. The problem is that the gains from implementing that mechanism overweights the possible drawbacks from this mechanism being broken. So you just brought the common general question. So is it worth to implement the mechanism? Just the drawbacks will overweigh the gains. So everyone should decide by himself. So,
Doug again. So it seems like your risk is the same no matter what decision you take, right? Because it's the other people doing validation. If a CA is compromised and somebody creates a wrong ROA for your resources, whether you take action or not,
I'm hosed. Correct.
Right. Okay. So it seems like you can make your decision as to whether you fear route hijacks to the route hijacks to the routes more than you do, compromise, massive failure to RPKI in the way that would generate invalid somewhere else.
I think I've done enough here. I've raised the awareness of it, and then I think the rest can be discussions over beer, perhaps, because I think we're kind of out of time and cookies are waiting. So,
what you would propose a mechanism for follow-up on this? Is there a working group that works on this, or an institution? Like, if we have a great idea, where do we send it?
My next steps, and what I'd already planned, is to raise it at RSAC. A bit of information is that I am also a representative at RSAC, and I'm also a member of the RSAC caucus. The RSAC caucus is the thing that does the work for RSAC. So it will be raised in RSAC. That may also spin off into other requests into other parts of the ICANN ecosystem, including something called SSAC, which I do know Jeff is also a member of, and some others here in this room perhaps as well. So yes, there's additional stuff coming through. And I think Jeff's right. I think those groups will circle back here, but I think it was good to just raise it. And so you have some awareness of issues, some operational issues that are caused by this particular corner case. And as Chris pointed out, possibly by other organizations who might think the same way. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Terry.